Thank you everyone for attending this meetup. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. Yeah, welcome to this virtual temporal meetup. We're going to be talking about getting your priorities straight. We've got a really fun agenda today. So we've got some great speakers. Donald, who's part of the Temporal team, Pedro and Juan, who are from Miro, are going to take the second talk, and I'm really excited to hear from them. I'm excited to hear from Donald as well, but I'm really excited to hear about what Miro is up to. I'm a big fan as well. We use it all the time for stuff ourselves and retros and things. So I'm really excited for this talk. The agenda, we're in the intro. This is me setting the context for things. And then Donald's going to go up first, talking about putting priority into your workflow. And then we're going to go into Juan and Pedro's talk about scaling temporal development with composable workflows. We'll have a Q&A section. And so do throw your chat or your questions in the chat. We'll be answering those questions. I'll be moderating those. And then Simon is going to give us a preview of what's coming up in the roadmap. And then Natalie, I hear, might be giving away a prize. That's not on the agenda, but it should be as well. So I think it'll be pretty fun. And Donald, I'm going to stop sharing my screen if you want to take over.
Okay, I'll try and share my screen. Stop. Has it come up successfully?
I see a Google, like a web page. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for. Excellent. So thanks very much for the intro, Sid. My name is Donald Forbes. And for those who've attended these sort of sessions in the past, you'll have heard Simon talking. And Simon is basically my colleague who does the same job role as I do at Temporal, which is a part of Temporal EMEA as a solutions architect. So I'm here primarily to try and help our customers use and understand the technology. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about priority and fairness in task queues. My guess is most of the people here have some knowledge of Temporal already, but I thought I would start by trying to confuse you as to what the heck a task queue actually is. So I grabbed kind of a picture from our docs that's meant to explain what task queues are, added in a simple workflow history, and threw a whole lot of arrows all over it to make it really complicated and ununderstandable by anyone. But let me try and clarify what we're looking at. Almost everything in Temporal is driven by task queues. It's an event-driven architecture. The events are effectively messages that go into a task queue. So whenever you want any work done, it will be an event that sits on a task queue that gets consumed by a worker that will actually progress a workflow, do a workflow task, or run an activity. And we interact with this task queue in various different ways. Sometimes the system, Temporal, will be putting messages on there, and sometimes it's messages being consumed and recreated by the worker. So if we look at my example history here, which is a very simple workflow, it's basically one step in it, it's doing a hello world type of message. And when the workflow starts, we're going to end up with scheduling a workflow task. That is the system effectively putting a message onto a task queue, and the task queue will process messages in an approximate first in, first out sequence. The worker that's going to actually work on your workflow task will grab things from the end of the task queue. So it's effectively taking the most recently, the longest lived task in that task queue will be picked out by the worker and say, I can work on this, let me progress it. It will work through things. When it completes the task, it will send a message back to the temporal service along with a command. That command will instruct the service what is to do next. That command may be, I'd like to schedule the next activity or another workflow task. And we can see that that's happening with kind of the green arrows and the purple arrows there where we schedule the task. The green dotted arrow is where a worker is picking off a message from the end of the queue and delivering it. This system works really well for most of the use cases people deal with. But if you can imagine in a busy system, we might have problems. So for example, imagine that there's a large batch job being processed. So someone has requested the start of 10,000 workflows and they've got 10,000 activities each. So you end up with literally millions of actions happening and tasks going onto these task queues. And that will process through, there'll probably be a large backlog that we need to work through. Now imagine you've got little user Bob who is wanting to try and use the online portal to submit a message of the same sort of type as the batch is processing. But they have submitted their request just after the batch has all gone in. So effectively their task sits at the back of the queue and it's the last one to be processed. And if they're looking at an online portal, they're going like, Why is my workflow not being progressed? It's just sitting there stuck. That's rubbish. That rubbish user experience. So we want to look at a way we can solve that problem. And you can do it in lots of different ways. You can have separate task queues for online transactions. Then you have to manage all these task queues. What Temporal has done is we've decided to introduce the idea of priority onto a task queue. So we can quite simply say, when you are putting message onto a task queue, you include with a priority number. And that priority is 1 for the highest priority through to 5 for the lowest priority. And then in our example, if your batch was all a priority 5, but your online message was a priority 1, then when the task queue is dispatching messages, it will sort the sequence of messages in there so that the ones at priority 1 come out first. In which case, your little chap Bob with his online portal will see his message effectively leapfrogging all of the messages in the batch so we can get to it and process it fastly. So that gives them a far better user experience. There is still scenarios where there are other problems. And if you imagine the scenario where rather than processing a big batch and doing things all for the one customer, you might have multiple tenants there and you want to be able to process messages for all those tenants at the same time. So you might have 1,000 customers yourself and you want to have a worker that will work through processing all the messages. Priority is good, but if you've got 500 customers that are priority 1 and 500 priority 2, the ones on priority 5 might never get processed. And you want to make sure that everyone gets a little bit of processing power, a kind of fair share as well. And that's where we've got the idea of fairness. So fairness is a process by which when you put the message on a task queue, it's not just a priority you give, but you actually give a fairness key and a weighting. And then the tasks are on that task queue. We will try and sort approximately with the fairness and weighting to what you've requested. So in my example at the bottom there, I've got 3 tenants, one with weight 1, one with weight 2, and one with weight 3. And that when we are dispatching messages, the one with weight 3 will effectively get 3 messages processed for every 2 of tenant 2 and for 1 of tenant 1. So we get all messages to be processed for every tenant. The weight determines how many messages for that particular tenant get dealt with. Hopefully that makes reasonable sense to you. I'm going to move on to a demonstration now. We'll hopefully clarify both priority and fairness. The demonstration is fairly simple. I'm going to run a whole lot of workflows. The workflow is really simple. It just does 5 activities. Do this, do this, do this, do this. That's all there is to it. The application is split into 2 components. We've got a client that is actually written as a React client, and it's going to talk to an API service, which is our priority demo service. The APIs we expose allow us to start lots of workflows and query those workflows to see kind of what the state of play with them is, so we understand how they are progressing. That priority service is also the worker that will allow us to progress workflows. So it'll be your standard temporal worker. I have ennobled that worker though. It's no longer configured to be as efficient as it can be. I've reduced it down to say I'm only going to process 5 messages a second on it. This means that when I put a lot of workflows on there, I can see a backlog appearing in my workflow task queues. Therefore, priority and fairness will be applied. If you haven't got any backlog, everything gets processed, so you don't need to worry about it. Okay, so let me start up my application. So I will start by starting the worker, which is written actually in Java. It's a Spring Boot app. And I'm going to start up my web UI. And I've also, at the top here, I've created a small script that allows me to use the Temporal CLI to query the task queues so I can see that messages are appearing on them and get an idea about what the load is of how many messages are outstanding. I should be able to hopefully connect on now. Yeah, indeed, my application has sprung to life. It's always a relief when you're trying to do a live demo. I'm going to start by looking at the priority only one, which is a very simple test. I'm going to run 100 workflows. And when I hit submit test, you'll see those workflows starting up in the worker. It's going to go through and start all these workflows up. It actually is using delayed start, so they don't immediately start processing, but it waits for a few seconds before it actually starts working. when it starts off, we should see this UI, which reflects the various different priorities running on the system. Let me just expand the screen slightly. There you go. And we can see in my task queue, I've got a backlog. So I've got lots of tasks in the queue waiting. They are being processed. So priority 1 has already been processed, as is priority 2. But we can see priority 5 still hardly touched. So it's the last set of workflows that will be worked through. So effectively, we're saying priority 1 gets done first, priority 5 gets done last. Couldn't be simpler. All right. I know now go back and I'll switch over to the fairness, which is a slightly more complex thing to show. I think the invoice processor example we've got here works quite well. The idea is we've got multiple tenants that are all running as part of my one worker that will process them all. And we want to make sure that they all get some processing done at any time. So if they send a message in, it will get processed within a reasonable time frame. And the default we've got set up here is they've all got exactly the same weighting. I'm going to do a little bit of mucking about because why not? So diagonally portions, obviously, I've been confunded or whatever the Harry Potter says, and they think they're really important. So they've upped their weight to 20. And we've also got one mega insurance person who's got 150 workflows. So I'm going to add in another mega insurance, but this time I am going to say it has a weight of 2, meaning it should get processed about twice the speed of the other one. I can submit the test, and again, we see the workflows coming in. They've got a small delay in starting so that we get a large workload appearing at once. So if we wait for a second, it will allow us to start all 281 workflows. And now we can see that they're reporting there and querying the workflows every 2 seconds to say, how are you progressing? How are you progressing? How quickly are you getting through your workload? I made a mistake. I should have had 150 workflows there. I've got 60, so apologies for that. The joys of a live demo, but you should still be able to see the idea of things. We can see that the fairness task queue is now getting hammered. Lots of messages on there. And our interface here is showing that the diagonal alley portions, which has not got many workflows to work through, but it does have the highest weighting. All of those messages have been processed already, so it's completed them quickly. The other ones, it's fair sharing across the different tenants so that we get equal processing of messages done, with another mega one moving up it is moving about twice the speed of the mega insurance. It looks like it's 4 times the speed because that's a percentage one and it's got half as many workflows. So it kind of looks like it's getting there faster, but it is getting more resource allocated to it than the mega insurance one. And we can see that's also reflected in the kind of the speed of the steps that they're working through. So now most of them have finished. We're seeing the mega insurance, its number of messages processed going steadily up until it gets to its peak level, which is the worker doing nothing with mega insurance. And that is fairness in a nutshell. Hopefully that is understandable by all. It is a feature that is currently in pre-release. So if anyone wants to use it, you can do, but you have to make a request through to our support organization or talk to myself or Simon. We'll get it enabled on your namespace. And that should be coming out of pre-release into public availability in February this year. And as far as I know, the priority works perfectly. There's no need for that to be in pre-release restrictions, but we want to release both priority and fairness together as a functionality. And there are some limits on fairness. There are a few edge cases. The one that I know for sure is if you have a busy system and you want to turn on fairness on a task queue, currently you can't do that without losing messages in that task queue. Clearly not a great situation. Works fine once you've got it enabled, but if you've got a task queue with a backlog on it, you don't want to enable fairness on that task queue today. Me revert back to my presentation. I'll hit that for any Q&A.
We're gonna save the Q&A for after both talks are done. So we're gonna move on to Juan and Pedro, if that's all right.
I will hand over. I will stop sharing, and thank you for listening.
Very much. All right.
Amazing. That was super interesting, Donald. Let me share here. Alrighty. So hello, everyone, and thank you again, Temporal team, for the invite. My name is Juan. I'm here today with Pedro. We'll be talking about scaling temporal development with composable workflows. And we are part of the database and storage platform team at Miro. Let me say we are huge fans of Temporal. We really like it and we use it a lot. And actually, Pedro was the one that brought Temporal into the company, I think 2 years ago, or maybe less, 1.5 years. And we use it a lot. And early on, when we started using it, we found ourselves working on workflows, and we realized how difficult it is to express complex workflows, like develop the code for complex workflows, right? It takes a lot of time and effort, and this is something that we realized early on, and we thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could just write workflows like a Unix pipe. Maybe you haven't seen Unix pipes before, but it's a simple concept. The idea is that you don't really need to write code. You just bring commands that someone else wrote, and you just use them. And this is super nice. And people that work on IT use this all the time. So we were thinking, okay, how can we treat Temporal like this, like something that you can just, bring some commands, put them together, and have a workflow running. And we came up with a framework that we developed that uses 3 ideas. And I will talk through those 3 ideas pretty quickly. I won't take long, I promise. So the first idea is we created components. And these components are very similar in the analogy to the commands on a Unix pipe, in the sense that the philosophy for the component is that each one of the components that we have is doing one thing only, and that's it. Components are designed not to depend on other components. And it's really a library that you can import into your worker, and it's plug and play. You can just really put that component into your worker, and that, registers a lot of activities and workflows without you need to do anything really. For example, we have many different components, I think more than 30, but here you have a couple of them. And you can tell that each one of the components is doing one thing only. For example, there is a GitHub component. If you bring that component into your worker, what happens is that the component will register workflows and activities into the worker that lets you create pull requests on GitHub and get code and trigger GitHub actions. Everything related to GitHub is available for you, and it's just there. And the same with all the components. And probably you might be wondering, if components are doing only one thing, then how will that help in creating more complex workflows? And then we have the second idea of this framework, which is compositions. And compositions are kind of similar to components, are similar in the sense that it's also a library you can import and just plug and play into your worker. It's very convenient. But the difference on composition is that compositions will register only one workflow. So when components are registering a lot of things, compositions will just register one workflow. And the idea is that compositions can use components to do whatever they need to do. And similar to components, compositions can be reusable and shareable. So whoever writes a composition can share it for others to use. So I'm guessing you have the idea already that this is similar to that Unix pipe that is very convenient. People that need to write a complex workflow, what they will do is, okay, they will split the problem in segments, and then it will write a composition for each one of those segments, which is kind of this. And writing compositions is quite easy because you have components that are doing all the work. So you just plug in the components that you need, and you have your composition ready. So this is pretty useful, but still there is a missing portion here, which is that you still need to write some orchestration to execute these compositions that you have written. And that's the third idea of the temporal framework that we developed, which is engines. And the idea of engines is just the same as components and compositions. It's a library that you can plug into your worker. And this library allows you to register functions. And this is pretty useful because we have different kind of functions that you can register into an engine. So first you have init functions, and these are functions that when the engine runs are guaranteed to run first, which are ideal for stuff like validation or initialization, those kind of things. We have exec functions. Exec functions are the ones that are doing the work. You can plug in error handling functions, and these are very useful because we have workloads that are very long, right? They take maybe months to complete. And the problem is what happens when that workflow fails in the middle, right? You never want that failure to just stop the execution. So the way we do this is that if you use the engine to run your workflow, whenever there is an error, instead of breaking, you call the error handling function registered. That will ask for human intervention, right? And error handling functions return three options, like ignore the error or retry the problem or just abort everything. So this is really, really handy. And finally, we have cleanup functions that are guaranteed to be executed at the end and are great for cleanup. And these are triggered even if there is an error, right? So you are guaranteed to clean up after execution. So as you can imagine, all of these functions really are generic, but we at the end use compositions here. So whenever someone needs to write a complex workflow, then it will plug into this engine idea the compositions that have written, and then the engine takes care of all the orchestration. So with this, finally, we were able to change and optimize the development time from days to hours or even minutes to write our workflow, which is super nice. And I think I will hand over to Pedro now. He will show you some examples of this. Let me stop sharing here. There you go.
This is why the presentation is not starting. Okay, I'll go like this. Hello, everyone, and thanks, Juan, for the great intro and deep dive into this framework. We already developed a lot of storage, a lot of compositions in the scope of storage. This is just a subset. Enterprise key management. This is a very complex composition that is basically, it orchestrates and helps the onboard, offboarding, and re-encryption of customers that want to use their own KMS key or encryption keys. We also have some disaster recovery practices, provisions. This allows us to at this moment, allows to restore different storages in different regions. We also have a skill to Postgres related orchestrations. And the last one we did actually, we completed a few days ago, is related with minor upgrade operations. And I can tell that in the past it would take days or weeks, and it literally took 1 day and a half. So this just shows how easy and how useful this framework is. But let's deep dive a tiny bit on the disaster recovery practices. I'm mindful of her time, so we can go very deep. So the composition is basically, we have the root composition, and this root composition is basically a workflow, and it's responsible to orchestrate different restore phases or different phases in the disaster recovery. We have the restoration phase that orchestrates the restoration of different storages. We have the validation phase, and we haven't implemented it yet, but we have other phases. So we will have other phases like data reconciliation, for example.
where we can onboard different microservices and our monolith. So this phase restore is a function that is going to call in parallel 3 different compositions. So we have the composition to restore a set of RDSs. We have another composition to restore a set of elastic cache and dynamos. And each one of these composition is going to call in parallel in the individual single instance, let's say, of the compositions to restore RDSs. And this restore composition for the single RDS is composed by 3 different components: the RDS component, the backup component, the secrets manager component. As one said previously, each component also have workflows and activities, but these workflows are contained within the scope of RDS activities as well, and the same goes with backup and secrets manager component. Let me show a workflow example we ran this morning. So here you can see this is the root workflow. So this is the root composition. This root composition triggers the phase restore RDS. So we are focused on the RDS. So I skip the other types. And this composition, the phase restore RDS, is gonna call all the single RDS restores compositions. And this is done in parallel. Again, each of these single RDS restore compositions is gonna call different components activities and components workflows. You can see here, as just one example, for this composition, single RDS composition, we can see that we have workflows from secrets manager. We have workflows from the RDS component. We have activities from AWS backup as well. Let me share probably here we can see, 1 second, visually we can see this. So this is the root workflow. This root workflow will call the phase restore composition. And this phase restore composition, we're going to call all those different single RDS compositions. And each one of them is going to call AWS backup components, activity, RDS workflow, RDS activities, and secrets manager activities and workflows. So this is quite useful. Juan mentioned that, it's super easy to onboard these components and compositions. And I want to show you really in code how it's done. So there's no, you only need this. Imagine you are developing very complex workflow or many different workflows. And in this case, you don't actually need to register individual activities and workflows. You basically register your component or even composition. It brings everything. This speeds up, it speeds up the release cycle. And also as part of this framework, we wanted to have a common interface between activities and workflows, especially for the properties. And one example is we define this timeout property, where in the workflow, you define workflow execution timeouts, and for activities, you set start to close timeout. But for us, it's, both of them mean what's the timeout, what is the execution timeout, right? And it makes it easier to have a common interface for both workflows and activities. The same for the summary. For the workflows, you have static summary. For the activities, you have summary. And to wrap up, we definitely have much faster pace development cycles. And said we spend a fraction of time that we were spending before. Safer code releases said we know that when we register that component, it brings with it, it registers all the activities and workflows, the same for additions. Reusable code. As an example, we have some workflows that wait for an RTS status. And if you develop these components, workflows, and activities generic enough, you can really reuse, right? You can reuse the activities or workflows within each component. You can use it across different compositions. And also it helps us to maintain best practices across our code. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much. Let me stop sharing.
That was great. As Simon posted in the chat, if you have any questions, please chuck them in there and we'll answer those questions. And this is for both talks. So Donald, if you want to come back on screen as well, if folks have questions for either speakers, I'd love to hear them and just make sure that I can see them again.
Yeah.
I guess Donald, I'll start for you. What are some of the trade-offs do you think our customers will be keeping in mind as they, start implementing priority queues? What are some of the best practice recommendations for folks that are maybe going into it for the first time?
To be honest, I'm not sure what the best practices recommendations will be yet on this, but I think there probably will be a lot of thought when you're coming to look at it for real as to whether priority is the most appropriate one for you or fairness as an approach. Fairness, in my opinion, is far more flexible and powerful. You can do a lot more with it, but with that complexity, you have added complexity to manage and understand. Whereas setting a priority of something 1 to 5 is incredibly simple as a concept. So you can go for it. Implementation wise, there will be some things you'll have to learn. So for example, if you set a priority on a workflow, the default is that activities implemented by that workflow will inherit the priority from them. So it's understanding that and whether you want to overwrite that for the activities or not, or do you want to just manage priority at activity level? You might be using it for communication to a third party that might be resource limited. So again, the choice priority, where low priority might never get a look in, or fairness, where you try and make sure everyone gets some of that access to that resource, but you could allocate it out according to how important your tenant is, I suppose. I don't know if I've answered the question, but it's a lot of stuff.
This is really helpful. One of the things that brought to mind for me was this, if you've got millions of things, maybe there's a point where a low priority task is blocking a high priority task. And if you're reusing workflows or you're reusing activities and stuff, then I guess, we'll be figuring out ways to handle that and giving out the best practices on those kind of specific types of things as we see what people do with it and they tell us and they share, and then we share it back with the community. Which is, I guess, a plug for anyone that wants to give a talk that is implementing this live and is like thinking of these questions and wants to share what they've been learning and doing. We always love to recruit speakers from our community to chat about what they've been working on, just like Juan and Pedro just did as well. So I'm going to give folks a little more time to submit questions. Any question is a good question. Pedro, did you raise your hand there? Did you have a question?
I did. If I raised it, it was my mistake. I don't know. I didn't.
Good. All good. All right. I am going to say then let's go ahead and shift into our technical roadmap preview. Simon, you ready for this?
All ready, mate.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing and let you take over.
Okay, thank you. You can keep sharing because I've got your slides for this one.
All right. Easy.
So always do 5 minutes towards the end of it on things go up in the roadmap. This is not the full roadmap. This is just a couple of highlights that people either asked for in the past or are just interesting things that I think of. So Temporal, we have 3 stages to our releases. We have pre-release, which is effectively it's undocumented or it's got very rough documentation. It can change it before it goes into production. This is just the first stab at things. We then go into preview, which is usually pretty stable. It still can technically change, but it typically doesn't. It's better documented. And then when we go into GA, which means it's available to everybody and you can do it. With both pre-release and preview, you have to ask us to enable that on your account. Or if you're in self-hosted, you have to put the flags in order to do it. But certainly for cloud,
come and talk to Donald or I or whoever is your support person, and we can do it for you. Okay, so pre-release, a couple of things that have jumped out to me. So obviously, task queue priority and task queue fairness. I know they might sound silly because Donald's spoken eloquently on that for 20 minutes or so, but we want people to use it and understand the power of this. And the other one as well that's there is polar auto tuning. So the way Temporal works is your workers pull Temporal to say, have you got any work for me to do? And in order to get that to work nicely, you've got to tune it. And what is coming out recently, which will eventually become the default, I believe, the polar auto tunes itself. So it's able to, based on various things about your machine. Things in preview, environment config. So this was something that's actually recently come from pre-release, which means that you can either use a TOML file or you can use environment variables to configure your temporal connection, which makes life a lot easier. Cloud Operations API allows you to manage your temporal cloud via APIs and not just the UI, and worker controls for Kubernetes, which is exactly as it says it is. And things that are now in general availability, cloud user groups. This is something that people have been asking for ages, and that's now generally available. So for instance, if you've got a group of, for instance, developers or admins, you can say, right, you're part of this group and you can just control it all as a group. We all know what a Linux group is here, I assume. Skim support. This is often thought of as a similar part to the cloud user groups because it comes in largely the same way, but Skim, that enables you to use Skim for your single sign-on on top of SAML. And that's a very useful thing. Namespace tags, when you've got a lot of namespaces in your account, you want to be able to filter them. So you can say, develop, the owner of this is, Barry, or the use case of this is development. You can now just go and filter those by namespace tags. And finally, so that if you're using Temporal Cloud in particular, you'll have seen coming up in the last couple of weeks, is the different saved views that you can default to. So you can say, these are the views that I want to see, and that then you can then save that so you can just click between them. And that makes life a hell of a lot easier, again, especially if you've got a lot of namespaces. Over to you again, Shai.
Yeah, can I plug something? It's not something we put out, but it was something I was working on and I'm really proud of, if that's allowed.
Yeah, I can't stop you.
Yeah. So something that one of our community members did recently is they released a Swift SDK. So there's a community generated SDK for any server-side Swift developers or Swift developers out there, and they're adding support for iOS and some other things as well. And so I'm really excited for more people to use about it. We didn't make it, so there's no SLA guarantees or anything, but you'll see the repo it's on, and I think you can feel pretty confident. And that's just github.com/.
Then Shai, did anybody go to speak at an Apple developer conference with it?
Yeah. I had.
Who was that?
Well, so that was me. It wasn't an Apple conference, but it is the server-side Swift conference in the UK, which has a very funny sponsorship prospectus that says this is the only technical event that Apple sponsors, which was very amusing to me. And I can't imagine what they're doing. So, if the Apple folks have seen that sponsorship deck and are letting them get away with it, but really fun little event. And,
we've had a question that's come through, which is super curious what Apple are using Temporal for.
I don't think I am allowed to answer that question, but they are using Temporal enough that they made an SDK for it. So I don't think I have permission to answer that question. So I need to go look up what I'm allowed to talk about. The talk that we did is live on YouTube if anyone wants to go watch it. And I'm sure they'll share some stuff in there as well. So I think that's it for today's meetup. Thank you all for attending. We do have a little feedback thing that you can fill out. It's just a QR code to let us know how we're doing, what's coming up, what you want to hear us talk about. We also have a couple other meetups that are coming. To check the Temporal website, we've got a virtual event with Pydantic tomorrow where we're going to be doing some live coding, and then we've got some other stuff that's coming up as well. And so check it out, see if there's anything virtual or near you that you might be excited about, and we'd love to see you again as well. I don't think we've decided on the plan for next month yet, so
yeah, there's definitely one in December. We are likely to come back either January or February, depending on. We haven't actually decided yet. So Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah.
Feels really far too early to be saying that.
Yeah. I'm just seeing the specter of American Thanksgiving like lording over me, and you all will have a quiet week next week, I guess. in the okay. So.
Yep.
But that's it for us. And then feel free to reach out to any of us in the community Slack if you have any questions or want to chat or need any help or anything. And otherwise, we'll see y'all next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.